Hello, everybody. Welcome to Devotion. So good to have you here. Today, we have two people talking to us about a practice called the rule of life. I'm just going to introduce them quickly. So this is Jonathan.
Hello.
And this is Jennifer.
Hi.
Why don't you just tell the audience, in case they may not know, like your year, your major, all that boring stuff we do all the time.
All that boring stuff we do all the time.
Yeah.
I'm a fifth year's humanities student, and I'm also part of the discipleship ministry and help out there on campus. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm Jen. I am a fifth year theater major and acting major, and I am here because I was invited by Sasha. So excited to talk to you all.
And I'm Sasha's second year, also in acting. And let's just dive right into it. First thing I'm going to ask you guys is about your rule of life practices. First of all, I barely know anything about it. A lot of the audience members may not know anything about it, but can you explain to us what is rule of life and how did you personally come across it?
Yeah, I came across it in a sermon series. John Mark Comer, Bridgetown.
Nice.
Big fan of his. But yeah, the way he talks about it in this awesome series actually about, I'm sure a lot of people know about his book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it's kind of that kind of stuff. And so for me, that's when I first kind of thought about it. And then over the last few years, just been thinking about different ways about what that means. And there's different readings on it. Even the history, like about just in the church and how that's used in like monasteries and in churches and with different groups of people. And so just like kind of looking into that and seeing what that is has been really cool. So essentially, rule of life being kind of just this way, rhythms to conduct a life that is rich and full and meaningful, that is intended to kind of help support and uphold just a deep relationship with Jesus and with other people. So it's kind of, yeah.
Wow, how old would you say it is? Because you said it's been like around for a long time and it has a history.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about like the rule of Saint Benedict. So like kind of like the monasteries and just when that started. You could even talk about rules in like the Desert Fathers and Mothers, and kind of just like the language kind of has really honestly spontaneously grown, not grown, since honestly the church has started being the church, really. So
wow,
it's old.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
For me, a couple years ago, we had a guest, Ken, who wrote this book, come to our church, and I was sitting there, and my life was so full, and he was like, "I'm selling this book. If you want to read it, and it'll help you get into the rule of life and the rhythms." And I bought it and I put it on my bookshelf and I forgot about it until recently, and I was like feeling so overwhelmed, and so I picked it up and I actually read it, got in my everything, and I realized this is exactly what I've been like needing, what I've been looking for, and I've been kind of all over the place with kind of like, prayer and Bible reading and different things like that, but didn't really have this structure. And rule has always been like a weird word for me. I'm like, oh, I don't like rules. But hearing like structure and like putting some kind of structure into like my spiritual practices and my life with God really gave me this sensation of this is something I need to do to put into practice. And so, that's kind of where the rule of life came into my life.
That's awesome. I love the word you just used, structure, because I was talking to one of my friends, Joyce, the other day, and we were both talking about how we just basically have no structure in our lives. And I personally, in my own life, I feel very close to God, and I'm very aware of like his love for me and everything. But in terms of structure, like my days and my weeks rarely look the same. Like I was just telling you guys earlier, like the only things that are scheduled and they're the same every week is my classes. And everything else, like when do I go to bed? When do I wake up? When do I eat? When do I pray? It's like different every day because I'm a very spontaneous person and everything. But I'm learning about like the need for structure. Like we do need structure to support our lives. And so that's why I'm so interested to hear what does this structure look like in you guys' lives.
Yeah. I think what I was thinking about when you asked that, or when you started bringing that up, is I think I know what it's like to have both structure and not structure in my life.
Okay.
Or even before that, actually, no, it's actually more, I guess, being a Christian long enough now where I've noticed like my deepening relationship with Jesus has been so cool. And I think something I've started to notice is that my relationship gets deep here and like life's really awesome. And then all of a sudden something changes and it's like life's different or something. And it's not that these practices like will make my relationship with Jesus amazing all the time and life will just be awesome all the time. But one thing that's really interesting though is I've noticed is that when I don't have intentional rhythms, I notice that I'm sometimes lacking that depth that I get with God because I'm not actually intentional about certain things in my life. It's crazy how much our sleep and even just rhythms of prayer or even just starting the day in prayer, a big thing too, starting the day on your phone or like with technology, like those things actually really do affect us.
Yeah.
And it's not that something's bad or something's good, but it's actually just like, well, like the intention actually really will set us up for our days and weeks and our seasons in life. So I think that's why I know I need structure because I've seen life without it. You know, like as I grow deeper with God, it's like, oh, I want God more, but then I'm not actually creating space for myself for that to flourish. And then I'm just longing all of a sudden and I'm not actually connecting with God because I'm not actually making the time. I'm too tired in the morning to pray or too hungry, honestly. Like I really am so bad with food. And so too hungry to pray, like, you know, and so that's an important part of this life. Just that these things, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say about the structure piece. So
nice.
Yeah, totally. When like you're not like rooted in something, like we all say, oh, we're rooted in Christ, right?
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, but how are you rooted in Christ? And like for me, it was like Sabbath was a really big thing. I used to think, oh, it's so sinful to stop everything and just like chill, you know, just like be in God's presence. Because I was like, no, I have this and this and this and this and this, and I need to get it done. But then just even reading this book and just being like, oh, I need a rhythm of Sabbath in my life. I need to take that rest. I need to like, you know, spend time with God, but not in a way that seems stale or like, you know, oh, I just can read my Bible. You know, I can actually do things with community and people and like, you know, after church and different things, because that community will also lead you to Christ, right? So realizing that it's okay and it's not sinful to do those things, but to have a rhythm of Sabbath, to have a rhythm of prayer, like you're talking about, like, when am I praying, you know, or like have a rhythm of like reading my Bible and making sure that I'm actually spending time like in the Word. If you have those three things and you're rooted in those like supporting structures, everything else that comes across that, like family, community, you know, your money, like how you're spending your time and everything else kind of can be supported. But if you're not rooted in something like in a rhythm, like you're saying, then it's kind of just like you're practicing all these spiritual practices that are all over the place, kind of like chaotically, and there isn't like something to support it.
Right. So it sounds like for you, Sabbath, community, and scripture reading is three of the most important ones for you.
Totally, along with prayer, right? So,
Right.
because prayer has to be in there, you know, you can't have a relationship with Christ unless you're communicating in some kind of way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. I'm interested, John, what are some of your maybe like one or two or three that are like most integral to your practice?
I actually really like when you were bringing up community. One thing that's really new for me is this idea of community as a spiritual practice. And so I'm actually going through kind of like I'm kind of building a new rule of life, which is a very slow process for me, and maybe that's something we could talk about too, about not being so intense and just kind of slowly building something that's really life-giving.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm trying to slowly build a rule of life around solitude and community.
Nice.
So practices with it's just me and God, and practices with me and my community and God. And so one practice would be, for sure, Sabbath. But I think another one is just having, for me, just 20 minutes in the mornings where it's quiet, there's no one else around, and it's just me and God. And however that time takes off, I usually like to do like just some kind of quiet prayer or just kind of ready for the day, like what some people call centering prayer. And so that's kind of one practice for solitude. One practice for community. Actually, my community piece is what needs more work still, and that's why I added community, because it's actually a new thing for me in my life. But just this idea of even just regular meals with the community, actually spending time with people, Literally, I think that's really important. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
so spiritual, like, oh, we're gonna like intercede with the food and or I don't know, like it's not like it's supposed to be this crazy dramatic thing, but like, am I eating with people I love once a week? Because that's good for me. It's good to be with people.
Yeah.
And so that would be the thing I'm trying to do more for the community side.
Nice.
Yeah.
So a question that I have that's kind of very informed by my own journey. So like I said earlier, I've been realizing in the last few weeks that I need a lot more structure in my life to like support my life and cause me to flourish in my relationship with God. But one of the things about rule of life that sort of that I have a question about is spontaneity, basically. Like, does it allow for spontaneity? Because I find a lot of joy in my life in spontaneity, like spontaneous conversations with a friend, or like spontaneous let's go for coffee and then it's just a great conversation, or just doing my homework at 10 p.m. and then I just feel like I just really miss God's presence, and then I just go into prayer right then spontaneously. Like, I find so much joy in that sort of spontaneous, these spiritual practices, but in a spontaneous way. So how can you preserve that while also searching for that structure? How can you preserve that spontaneity while also adding structure? Is it possible to have both? I'm very curious about that.
Well, one thing that I really enjoyed from reading God in My Everything was the fact that play is an aspect that's part of the rule of life. Because, when you're a kid, you do those things spontaneously. You're like, yeah, I'm going to go like dig in the garden or whatever. Like, you just do fun things just for the sake of doing fun things. And as we grow up, we lose that sense of play. We lose that sense of it's okay to kind of just like, do these things randomly, or as you're saying, spontaneously. And I love that spontaneity is part of the rule of life, part of something you can build into the structure, because spontaneity and like that sense of playfulness, it actually leads you to worshiping God. Because like if you're in creation, you're going for just a random spontaneous walk, you're like, wow, like God is so huge, and like look at all of these beautiful things he's created. Or you're like, hey, I'm gonna go like, I don't know, do some pottery with some friends or whatever. Like in that, you're still like, you're creating something, right? And that leads you to be like, wow, our God is creative. There are different aspects where you can be spontaneous. So I think spontaneity definitely fits into the rule of life.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, I think the balance between, like what you're saying too about rule of life, it's like rules, like it sounds so constrictive, and I think rule of life should never be this rigid thing. If it's rigid, then it won't work.
Right.
But I think at the same time, if we're too loose, then like what I was saying, then I'm not actually like, then my quality, actually I noticed that my quality of faith in life are actually decreasing.
Yeah.
Because I'm just not actually being intentional at all. Yeah. And so I think there's like this flux in this middle space of just between structure and rhythms, but also like the freedom and spontaneity side that I think are really important. And for example, like when I'm building my rule of life, like that's a slow process. Like I don't know if it'll ever be finished. Like there's always like revisions and new seasons call for new practices, and just even just reflecting like once every week or month or whatever on like, is that working for me, or and always checking in is really important. So even just in building a rule of life, there's freedom and spontaneity, but also in the day I think there's spontaneity in the sense that we should be building things that are actually feasible for us. Yeah. Like we know ourselves, each of us is different. Some of us actually really like a lot of structure. I find I'm kind of in the middle. I like some structure, some freedom. But so whatever we're like, some of us will need more freedom to just like have more space to respond to things. But also then the challenge I think for both the person of extreme structure and the person of extreme spontaneity is to know like, when is it actually good for me to actually be more spontaneous? When's it actually good for me to be more structured? And so, and I think so like a personal example for me is finding freedom to try something and see what happened, and to learn from that, and then maybe change it around and stuff like that. And so that's really happening for me right now, and I really want to try growing and just spending more time in prayer. And so actually I've mixed a kind of a more like morning kind of time where I try to do every morning if I can, and then actually also spontaneously throughout the day try to like pray and practice the presence of God as a spontaneous act.
Yeah, so
And
it's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah.
It's not either structure or spontaneity, it's both and. So I really love that. I think you guys have done a great job of sort of introducing us to what this is all about. And so for the next 15 or so minutes, I just want to invite you. John was just talking about his journey of like editing and readapting his rule of life. And as you were talking about that, I was reminded of like this thought that I've been having, which is for me in my life, I know that one thing I really need to incorporate in my everyday in like a structured way is intercession, like praying regularly for people that are close to me, especially people that don't, have a relationship with God yet. So I know that that's definitely something, whether or not I call it a rule of life, that I want to incorporate into my everyday life. So for the next 10, 15 minutes or so, I would encourage you, either in a group or even just by yourself with God, just kind of think about and ask God to show you like what parts of your life do you need structure in, and what's something that you could incorporate into your life that will give it more structure and in such a way that you will flourish in your faith. So thank you so much for sharing, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having
Of course.